I am going to introduce our awesome speaker. So Brian Oblinger is a community expert, and he spent the past roughly 20 years helping massive brands leverage the communities around them to achieve their business goals. So he's worked with companies like Comcast, eBay, Home Depot, HP, PlayStation, on really understanding and connecting with their customers in a kind of community-oriented way. So today we're going to hear from him a little bit about his lessons that he's learned throughout his career, and especially when it comes to developing community strategies. So everyone, this is your first lesson. Brian, come up onto the stage, and everybody hover over his video when he pops up and hit him with all of the hearts. Send him a lot of love.
Oh my goodness.
Keep it going.
Yeah. I often say that the best feature of Toucan is just spamming mass quantities of emoji at people. So I'm glad we're all on the same page. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being here, Brian. It's great to see you. We're all really excited to hear what you have to say, and maybe kick it off just with a little introduction.
Sure.
About who you are and how you got here.
A long and winding road. Yeah, so I guess the story is that I've been doing community for like 20 years, which seems impossible, but it just turned out that I happened to be in the right place at the right time around the beginning of this thing, kind of in the 90s. And I always tell the story that I started out as a volunteer moderator on a gaming community somewhere, and then just kind of did like every job, in community, and like made up some, invented some, and whatever. And eventually found myself working in a couple of technology companies as like VP of community, and now I'm on the kind of consulting side. So I've just been able to see a lot of this stuff over a long period of time. I've screwed up enough for everybody on this call so I can give you good advice on what not to do. Like that's the real value I bring, is telling you what not to do, how not to hurt yourself. Yeah, and just happy to be here and hear as much as I can.
Well, really looking forward to it. I'd love to just kick it off. I want to hear more about this gaming community that you became a moderator of, because what I really am curious about is, what was the first community that you were a part of, and what did it teach you?
Yeah, I mean, I was a kid, when the internet became a thing, and of course I was into like PlayStation and gaming and whatnot. And so the first thing I did when we got an internet connection was, I think it was like Netscape at the time, like go type a search in Netscape, and found, a bunch of cheat code sites and a bunch of, a couple of gaming sites. And it just turned out that PlayStation was one of the first companies, a lot of people don't know this, PlayStation was legitimately one of the first companies to really have a very vibrant, big community for like their customers, the gamers, right? And so I was just there all the time. I had no life. My parents, ironically, were like, "What are you doing on this community? That's never going to lead to anything." The irony, right? Fate loves irony. So, I just spent all my time there, and eventually they were like, "Hey, you're here all the time. You should just like help us out, be a volunteer moderator." And being a stupid kid, I was like, "I'd love to work for you for free. Like, this is awesome. What more could I ever want in my life?" So, that was it. It just all kind of happened. And it turned out that at the time, Lithium hosted that community. And, I kind of got in with them and worked for them for 10 years and, in various capacities. So there you go. You never know, how things are going to align to become a career, I guess.
That's really cool. And is there like an aha moment for you when you realized that community could actually be a career? I feel like in recent years it's become more of a buzzword, especially given COVID, when people have felt really removed from each other. But you've been doing it for a long time. So when did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think I grew up thinking that I was going to be like a game tester for a living, like that was the goal. And then this community stuff happened, and I think the first time I realized it could be a career is like the first time they put a contract in front of me and said like, hey, that thing you've been doing for free, we'll pay you to do it. And I was like, what? Like, I still, honestly, to this day, I still feel like I'm getting away with something. I feel like I'm stealing, right? I'm like, there's no way people are paying me to do this thing that I was already doing and love to do. So yeah, I think that was kind of the moment where I was like, wow, interesting. Like, companies actually are starting to care about this, and there's money in it. You can make a living. Was probably like the first time I realized that, and it's just been wonderful ever since. And I'm so like glad that now it's become something that other people can have that moment, and go, hey, I can make a career out of this, and I can do what I love and that kind of stuff. So I think it's what a wonderful kind of industry and opportunity for people to sink their teeth into.
Yeah, definitely. Are you at the moment? Are you a part of any communities that shape your life that you aren't running?
Yeah.
And how do those impact you just right now where you are in your life?
An interesting thing happened to me, and I've heard this similar story for other people, is that when you go from participating in communities you're passionate about and that kind of stuff to like actually running them for a living, that you tend to participate in less communities over time. But I'm part of a bunch of communities. I don't participate as much as I used to. Like on that PlayStation community, I had like 15,000 posts over a couple of years, and like I was a nut job, right? Like I was that guy, a super user, we would say. Nowadays, I'm more of a kind of passive consumer, and I use communities much in the way that we talk about, like, hey, I use it for support. I use it to learn things. What are other people saying about things I'm passionate about? So yeah, I'm a part of a bunch of them. I don't really, have time as much, unfortunately, to contribute in them as I would like. I'm interested in sustainability. So like, I'm in a bunch of communities about like Tesla and solar panels and, wind power and, green related things, stuff like that. Cars, so kind of just general purpose, general interest stuff. And then one-offs, when I'm an idiot and don't know how to do something, I have to go seek the wisdom of the internet. So it works out pretty well for me there.
I mean, that's kind of the power, yes, of the internet, but also of virtual communities. What I found is that when you get to the right places, then everybody's so excited to help.
Yeah.
And there are so many great forums for that. So
yeah, there's something for everyone out there for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about your strategic consulting company. So you launched this company during the pandemic, if I'm remembering correctly. So can you take me through that journey? What was it like?
Well, I got fired, so that was part of it. So I got laid off right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I jest about being fired, but I got laid off at the beginning of the pandemic from the company I was working at because they, had a bunch of financial things going on. And I spent like 6 months just talking to people. What are you doing? What's going on? What's your community looking like? And of course was interviewing and whatever during that time and trying to find something. And then I decided that it was actually just going to be easier to like slavishly copy my good friend Erica Cool and copy her whole business. She also has a consultancy and kind of paved the road for me, right? So it wasn't exactly an original thought, but what I realized was at that time, companies, it like finally happened, right? We had been talking for like 15 years about how someday every company in the world is going to need a community and there's going to be all this, motion around it. And like that happened, right? That kind of was pushed along. I think we were kind of trending that direction anyway, but the pandemic definitely gave it the little nudge that it needed, let's say. So, I just was like interviewing with a lot of people and they were saying, hey, we can't hire right now because we have the hiring freezes and, all this stuff with COVID. But could you consult? And for a while that answer was like, no, I'm really looking for something full time. So again, just stupid luck and kind of market forces conspired to say, hey, there's a need here, there's something interesting. And so I just said, hey, that's great, let's go do that.
Is there a noticeable difference that you see in between companies that are trying to engage their communities virtually or during the pandemic and pre-pandemic? where I can assume that people were trying to engage people more in person.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies had come. So it's interesting because the journey on this has been, pre-1995, like all community stuff was in person, right? You went to a conference, you went to a lunch and learn, you did this, that, the other thing. Then the internet came along and it was like this huge shift to like, we're going to do webinars. You can take it from your desk. It's convenient. You don't have to travel. You don't have to get in your car and drive somewhere. And so I think like companies went 100% to that direction of like virtual is everything. We're not doing in-person stuff. And then I think, before the pandemic, there was starting to be more of a nice blend of that where people were understanding, hey, a truly vibrant community includes both online and offline events, and we should be investing in both and figuring out how they connect to each other, and like how do you continue the conversation from an offline event online and vice versa. And so I think that was becoming a really popular thing, and you started to see that big companies were spinning up whole teams to do both of those things. COVID happens and it's like, oops, there goes all of our plans for user groups around the world, right? Like we can't do the Chicago user group anymore. So now we swung all the way back to virtual. And I think what we're seeing now is, kind of as things open up a little bit, you're starting to see some of those in-person events, kind of come back, but feels like the virtual online stuff is still going to persist for a period of time. And then to answer your question, there's a lot of overlap, right? There's like an 80-20 thing probably here where most of the activities or the way that we think about building communities are pretty applicable, whether it's online or offline. And then there's probably like the 20% that's unique to that venue or that way of thinking about community. So that's kind of what I tell people is there's a lot of overlap, but then there's certainly the things we have to do differently or think a little bit differently depending on, the delivery mechanism.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the businesses that you work with, how do you go about building community into a company's mission when they haven't really prioritized it in the past? And how is that different from working with a company that has been kind of pretty community-based since the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I try to start from the start, and this is my advice, I guess, to everybody here, is you got to start with like, what are our goals? What are we trying to achieve here? What's the business value of what we're trying to do, or what's the value to our members going to be? That has to be the starting point. And then from there, hopefully that leads to, okay, here's our 5 goals for the year, or here's what we're going to do, which then becomes your strategy, right? Start with the strategy, start with the why. Think about what your customers or your users need from a value perspective, and just focus on building that first. And so like a lot of people want to talk about vendors, they want to talk about, stuff that I'm like, hey, that's down the road, right? We got to figure out what our strategy and our goals are first. Otherwise, we're just going to be building a bunch of stuff, and I don't know that that's going to be useful. So that's kind of my general way of being, with people who've never done it before. And there's a lot of education, right? You have to spend a lot of time talking about, what is a community? What does that even mean? How do we define that word in our context here? And like, what's the point of doing it? What are the requirements to do it well? Because that's the other side of the story is you'll run into a lot of companies where they're like, hey, I know I need to do this. I've heard about it. It's on my list that I got to check off somewhere. And I kind of say, well, that's not what it is, right? It's not a checklist item. It's, there's some investment here, and it's a long-term, like it's a long game. You should be thinking in terms of years, not weeks and months, right? So definitely starting from the very beginning there is where I go with these companies that are trying to figure it out for the first time.
And what exactly would you say, because you can't really like dive in and start with the strategy. What are the requirements, like basic requirements that you need to have in place for your community before you can kind of start diving into strategic planning?
Well, I think, at most companies, you have to have someone who either gets it or is willing to put themselves on the line, right? All things sort of start at companies with someone who says, hey, this is a good idea and we should do it. Like if you don't have a stakeholder that really believes in it and is willing to drive it internally, then you're probably not gonna have a good time. Let's say that, right? Could be a little difficult to get going. So I think the base level requirements are that they you have someone who's a champion and wants to drive it and actually can do that in the organization. And then I think, it comes down to the investment level of like, hey, we don't have to go all out here at the beginning, but just knowing that this is going to cost a little bit of money and we might need to hire someone to run it. If they're unwilling to do those two things, then I think those are yellowish / potentially red flags of like, yeah, hey, maybe this isn't going to work out, right? Like you're just not at a stage yet where you're ready to commit to something like this.
Do you find that a lot of companies, the companies that you work with and just large corporations in general, are trending towards bringing on, say, chief community officers? I know that's kind of a title that's been thrown around a lot recently. I'm curious to hear your perspective on it.
So you see that definitely at like startups where I'm working with several companies right now where like the first call I ever had with them for like a consulting engagement, they were like, yeah, we just signed the paperwork at Delaware yesterday to become a company, which was really amazing to be talking about community that early on. But they have a core belief that, hey, we want to, like, community is the product, right? We want to build around this concept of community before we even have a product, and like leverage what the community tells us about their needs and their desires and what they're looking for, what would be valuable as a way of, building them, using the community to help build that product. So you see it there. I think the bigger companies, more established companies, they're not ready, for that level of commitment, but you are starting to see more directors of community, VPs of community, head of community, kind of roles like that. So yeah, the C-suite thing is interesting. It's happening a little bit here and there, but I think we still have a lot to prove, frankly, on, what our value is to really get there.
In a similar vein, how do you see internal communities reflecting on external communities? So when it comes to creating like a community of customers, what is the effect of a strong employee community on that kind of outside commitment?
Well, I think for starters, they understand what a community is because they're using one every day. And that certainly helps when you go into meetings and you're saying, hey, we're doing this customer community thing. It's less of a stretch or less education, if they kind of understand at a really elemental level, okay, like, cool, we have this internal one. Is it going to be like that? Well, yeah, it's going to be kind of like that, but it's going to be different in, again, 80-20, these different ways. So I think that's helpful. The other thing is a lot of people tend to keep their like internal community separate from their external community. And there's reasons for why people do this, but I actually prefer to have them, if at all possible, on the same platform, provisioned, with just permissions. And the reason is that I've found over the years that internal employees are much more likely to contribute to the external community, right? If it's all in one platform, they're already going there, they're logging in every day. People keep them separate and then they wonder why their employees don't bother with the customer, side of things. It's like, well, because it's a separate thing, they have a different profile. So I found just bringing it all together is actually like really useful in helping people understand why it's important. And then they're already there, they may as well contribute.
That makes sense. I got a question that popped up in my messages from Michelle, and he's wondering, what are the key components of a very engaged community? Because there's a range, and so what kind of the most engaged, what do they have that other communities don't?
Well, there's a critical mass of an audience is a key part of it, and you can define that however you want. When I say critical mass, some people think that's 50 people, some people think it's 50,000, some people think it's 5 million, right? But the point is that there's enough people there that it feels like, okay, like there's a lot of people here and there's stuff going on and there's contributions that are happening, right? So that's the first and foremost thing. The second I would say is really successful communities have great content strategies. I talk about this a lot, that we can do everything else right, but if we don't have good content, then good luck to you. So having a good content game, and that includes, both what we're doing as a company, but how we're also instrumenting what our customers are doing and incentivizing them with, different, motivations and gamification, stuff like that. So I think those are kind of the top two. The third one, I think, is just having a culture in your community where people are helpful and not jerks. And, you know, like the number one killer of kind of community engagement is, hey, has anybody out there heard of Stack Overflow before? Have you ever heard of that community? You go there and you ask a question, and what happens? You immediately get destroyed, right? They're like, you didn't ask the question the right way. And like, you know, I didn't realize I was on Jeopardy, that I had to like format a phrase of a question. And so I think having a culture of like, hey, we're all here to help each other. We're all here to learn. We're all here to come together around this thing that we like, or this product we use, or whatever it is a really, really important part, right? You can't really get good engagement if people are scared to post or feel like everybody here is really mean, you know? That may sound elemental, but a lot of communities fail that test, to be perfectly honest with you, where you show up and it's kind of like, this just doesn't really feel like a place I would want to hang out. And so it's no surprise at that point that, you know, hey, our engagement's low. Yeah, no kidding.
What do you do when you get to a point, like if you're a community moderator or community organizer and you're seeing that that's the way that people are interpreting the kind of vibe of your community? What do you do to fix that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two things are, number one, get rid of the jerks, which is really hard for community professionals to do, because it's like, oh, but they're our top contributor, you know, like if I get rid of them or I tell them they, you know, everybody's afraid of offending that top contributor, even if they're like a total ass, right? Because it's like, well, they're providing all of our content. I think the reality is you're much better off without those people than you are with, and you just need to kind of, you know, understand that. Look, I'm not saying you just like go ban them straight away, right? But have a conversation with them and say, hey, you know, we have some, maybe we changed our guidelines. We're going to start enforcing them a little differently. You know, we would love for you to be part of the solution here. If they choose not to do that, they kind of leave you with, you know, very little choice, right? So that's number one thing. Don't let the jerks rule. Number two, model the behavior you want to see, right? So go find the people that are sort of illustrating the culture you want to have and the behaviors you want to see in your community, and highlight them. You know, highlight them as, hey, these are our leaders. They're in our super user program. This is who you should aspire to be, and make sure that they have ample opportunity to sort of illustrate to people, here's what successful contribution looks like in this community, right? And I think the combination of those two things is like the beginnings of how you clean up a community like that. It's not all the answers, but that's a good starting point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also in the chat, it seems like Rennie has posted a link on a no asshole rule. So yeah. So I think that's really sound advice. How do you go about, just when it comes to your community strategy, how do you go about choosing the proper KPIs with the companies you work with? And at what point do you say, like, yeah, we got this right? Because I feel like sometimes it takes time for things to happen and for you to get confirmation that things are going right. And so when does it click?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the really successful, and I talk about this nonstop, so I apologize for anybody out there who's heard me talk before, because I'm sure you've heard this, but you know, for me, it's about connecting what we're doing with community to the goals and objectives of the business, right? Whatever, or the organization or the cause or whatever it is, right? People need to be able to draw a really straight line from, you know, here's what we're doing in community, and this is how it impacts the cause of the business or the organization or whatever. So if you think of it in that context, that means that your KPIs and your goals, you know, should have some semblance of like business objectives to them. And so what I mean is, like, if you go to a meeting with your CEO and they say, well, tell me about community, what's going on there? And you start talking about like page views and posts and, you know, unique visitors and whatever. Those are good like operational metrics to kind of help you understand, you know, attendees, you know, to help you understand like, okay, feels like we're on the right track from like a community operational perspective. But to that individual, they don't actually understand what any of that stuff means. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. Like, what's the benchmark? So if you translate that and you say something along the lines of, hey, you know, we've been running these events, for example, And our average used to be 400 people attend an event, and now in the last 6 months we've got that up to 500 people. And what that means for us is, because at these meetings we're showing different use cases, we're actually exposing people to new areas of the product they haven't seen before, which we then know means that they're more likely to try more of our product, become more embedded in it, and then they'll renew when the time comes, right? If we're a subscription service. That's something that someone in the business can understand. Okay, you're doing events, but what it really means at the end of the day is we're helping up our retention number. Those are the kinds of metrics that people care about, and that's how you convince the powers that be in the organization that this is important and that you should invest more in it, right? Because if we can make that link and say, hey, imagine what we could do if that number was 1,000 people, what does our retention look like then? But to get there, I'm going to need extra dollars and maybe hire someone, because we just can't, do those kind of events. So that's how I would position it.
Great. I'm going to invite Kelly up to the stage to ask her question. Kelly, if you click, there should be an orange present button at the bottom of your screen. You come up and ask your question.
Hi, I was just curious, how do you kind of start your community, and what is it, what are the platforms? Is it a platform thing? Is it something that you do through Toucan? Like, what is it that is that beginning step? Because for some of us we know and some of us we don't.
So let's do a little, hang on here for a second. Let's do a little live strategy exercise here, right? So for me, before I can answer the question about what platforms, do you need, or what technology, what are your goals, right? Give me the 5 seconds on your organization and what you think your goals are for community.
So I work for a chamber of commerce, so we're all about community.
Yeah.
And bring people together, but maybe bring them together in a different way. So we do have, we have in-person events, which are sometimes few and far between, but we also have online events. And so trying to figure out what does that look like for a membership organization, kind of like what you were talking about. And I mean, we already have the typical Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, but we also don't make it so that other people can engage with us. So I guess, what does that look like?
Is that the outcome? What's the outcome you're looking for? Is it more engagement? What's the, if you could solve one problem with all of this, what would it be? What's the outcome?
People being able to connect with one another.
Okay.
I mean, our members getting to know one another better so that they can work together, and possibly give referrals to one another.
And what kind of things, so when they connect with each other, what do they talk about? What are they learning from each other?
Just what their businesses are, how they can refer to one another. Can they get business out of one another?
Okay, so you run a nail salon, I run a nail salon, how do you do it? Best practice type stuff, how do you run your business?
Or it might be, you run a nail salon, I run a advertising company. How can we work together, or how can I help you? It could be 2 completely different companies, organizations, businesses.
Okay. Yeah, so these are the questions I ask clients, right? To kind of suss this out. So the answers to some of those, without knowing anything else, right? Just here we are, with those basic questions. What I would say is, it sounds like you kind of have a couple of use cases here. One is, we want to connect these people so they can sort of, talk to each other, learn about each other and their services. That feels like kind of marketplacey to me a little bit, not necessarily that they're buying, services from each other on a marketplace, but they're mixing together to understand, what they're doing. The second one is kind of the best practice. Hey, how have you handled this? What do you do when? How do you run a business kind of thing? So, in the vein of those 2 types of use cases, it could be, a discussion type of area, type of technology. It could be something like this, where maybe some people want to do more networking, more classic, hey, we're going to get on a Toucan or a Zoom or whatever and do a networking thing. But do you see what I'm doing? I'm sort of taking your outcomes and trying to design technology around those, instead of saying oh, we'll go buy this thing and then try to shoehorn your customers into it. It's really what do they need to be successful? And some of them may tell you, right? You may ask them, hey, would you rather do this in a live event or kind of in a more asynchronous way on like a discussion platform? And that data would also be useful, I think, for you to start to figure out what should we be focusing on or investing in. Because if everybody tells you, yeah, we really love this, you know, like what we're doing here, this style of like networking and seeing people's faces and live chat, then maybe I would invest in that before I go do, you know, something else. So it's very much mapping what you're doing from like kind of an outcome perspective and what they really want to do and how they want to interact to like, okay, now we need to go buy some technology that solves those problems for us.
Great, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Thanks, Kelly. Next, Ken, if you want to come up and present. Or I can ask the question that he messaged in the chat. So he says, sure. What do you use to understand and engage with the people in the community to build empathy and connect with their needs?
Mm-hmm.
Like mentality, communication styles.
Yeah, I'll say this.
Empathy into your community strategy, I think.
Yeah, I'll say this at a base level. So I'll say this at a base level, which is you got to figure out what they want and what the value. Like oftentimes when we're building communities, we focus so much on what's our business value and what are we going to get out of it and how can we, you know, do this, that, and the other thing. And a lot of times the answer to really great communities is that we've spent a lot of time actually investing in what our customers, you know, our audience, whatever you want to, you know, whatever they are to you, what they want and need, right? Like leading with value is the most important thing you can do in any community. And therefore, one of the things I say about this is that so many companies spend ridiculous amounts of time and money and energy like guessing, you know, well, we think they want this, and those all come with like your, you know, rose-colored glasses of like when you guess, you sort of lead the witness a little bit, right? And you're sort of using your own experience to inform that. And what I say is like, just go ask them, right? So the first thing I do to understand and engage with people is like, let's do a survey. Let's hop on a call. You know, let's talk about it. Like, tell me what problems you have that we can solve for you, or what kind of value do you not find anywhere else on the internet? Seems like a pretty good starting point, right? For us to figure out, hey, here's what we should be doing to build our niche and build this community and like actually give them some value. And I think that activity inherently is built on empathy, right? Like you're asking them, what are your needs? What do you need to be successful? What can I do to help you out? It's not, you know, hey, I built a thing and I want you to come here and contribute for free so that I can quote some, you know, ROI number internally at my company. Like that's going to happen if we do this right. But I want to start with, you know, what they actually want and need. And a lot of times it's just asking them, you know, not complicated advice, but it's the right one.
There he is.
Hey, Ken.
Awesome. My question was regarding, and I apologize, I missed part of your answer, and I don't want to hold up people here as well, but you know, it's regarding empathy and people in the community connecting with their needs. I heard the tail end what you were talking about in terms of surveys. Do you use anything beyond surveys to do that? Just to give you a little bit of context, I'm leading a meetup group. It's a community group rather than for profit. You know, basically our goal is to build community support capability and agile mindsets in our area by creating opportunities for connection, sharing knowledge and leadership, so that we and the groups we work with can better learn, adapt on our customers, our workers, deliver value, and also enjoy what we do. So we've got a pretty clearly defined purpose there. What else do you do besides surveys to engage with your folks?
Yeah, I mean, surveys, talking to them in general. Sometimes we'll do advisory groups, you know, bring 10 people together and have a conversation. I find those actually to be pretty useful because, so here's the interesting thing about like advisory groups and stuff, is oftentimes people think the goal is to like have them come together and talk to you as the, you know, the organizing group or whatever. I actually think that the real goal of really good advisory groups is you get them talking to each other, right? And you'll learn a lot about what they say to each other. So that's always my goal. So I think any way that you can get, you know, some meaningful feedback along the way and like continue to do that as a regular cadence also helps you build a baseline. And then you can understand when you make a change or you do something different, how do they feel about it? Well, you know, and that's where like like people use CSAT or NPS or, you know, how satisfied are you kind of questions, then you can kind of get an idea of like, hey, we changed this thing and people are happy, or we changed this thing and people aren't as happy as they were before. Now I know that maybe I screwed up and I should back out that change or do something different or whatever. So I think just talking to them in any form or, you know, whatever you can is really useful.
Yeah, we've been using things like lean coffees to help them connect more, which has been really helpful. And then the other thing we're thinking about introducing is actually empathy interviews, to actually interview a couple of the members of the community themselves. So yeah,
awesome.
Fantastic. Actually, so Peter, if Peter, you could come up onto the stage, he has a follow-up question.
Yeah.
To what you're just saying.
Hey, did it work?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll work.
Yeah. Sweet. If you hear my dog snoring, it's 8:20 here p.m. I'm actually going to read my question out because I think I phrased it better than I can do it on the spot here. So my question is, following on from your point, Brian, about asking the community what they want from the respective community, I was wondering, as a new community manager, so you've just been hired, and you're setting goals in terms of, you know, the community strategy. I'm wondering what amount of time is a good amount of time to spend in the kind of listening process. So what amount of time should you spend asking your members and listening to their feedback on what they want from the community before actually diving into executing the strategy?
Yeah, this is a good one. So here's what I would say. Everybody's, by the way, when people ask, people are always looking for me to give them like, you should spend exactly 27 days, you know, on this. Here's the real answer is, as long as it takes, and here's how you'll know that you're done. When you just keep hearing the same things you've already heard over and over again, that's a pretty good signpost of like, okay, I've kind of uncovered what I'm going to uncover at this particular moment, and I can probably just take that and run with it. I think there's also a point to be made here about you know, it's really important to obviously listen to customers or users or your members or whatever they are to you, but there's also, you know, as kind of the expert and the person that has to build this thing, you have to kind of curate like, here's what our capabilities are and aren't. So people can come along and ask for a Ferrari, but maybe we can only give them at this moment a VW, right, or whatever. And so like listening's important, but I also think you have to be the arbiter of truth, you know, here in the beginning. And I think when you start hearing the same thing over and over again and those calls become less valuable, then you kind of know, okay, I'm done here. Now I can start to like use what I heard as data to go inform my strategy and execute, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially that last part where you get the sense that you're coming back to the same points over and over, and that from experience definitely feels like the right time to just get on with it, because the people have spoken, right?
Right.
You just have to get on with it. Yeah. Cheers, Brian.
You bet. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. The next question's from Emily. So Emily, if you hit the present button at the bottom of your screen, you can come up and ask.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hello. Oh my God.
You say hi? Okay, good, yeah. And anyway, so I help run a romantic comedy writers Facebook group, and word has spread. So it's been a year, and now there's like 260 members or something like that. So it's really exciting. And I'm kind of at the stage where I want to start inviting like screenwriters or authors and other people to come and speak for free, you know, to the group, so we can learn about story and the writing process and all of that. And so I guess, do you have any tips for, you know, asking people for a favor basically to come and speak? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And your little one's excited about the question as well, which is great. So, yeah, here's what I would say. I first of all, I love this tactic, right? I love bringing in, you know, guests and experts and people like we're doing here, I guess. And like, what I would say about it is, you know, some people have intrinsic motivation and some people have extrinsic motivation, right? But a lot of people have extrinsic motivation. Like at the end of the day, for a lot of people, the answer is sort of like, what's in it for me? You know what I mean? Like not everybody can be the pure, you know, Robin Hood figure. And so when you go start talking to those people, I just try to learn a little bit about them and what makes them tick and what their motivations might be, and see if there's a match between, you know, maybe some people will do it out of the goodness of their heart, but maybe some people will do it because they want to advance the industry, or because they're looking for screenwriters and maybe they're thinking they'll uncover some new talent by doing this in your group. I don't know, you know, I'm not in that world, so I don't know exactly what all those motivations would be, but I would kind of, you know, strongly position to them, you know, hey, here's what's in it for you, right? And here's what you're going to get out of this, whether it's networking or something else. And that way it's an even, you know, like there's no exploitation, right? It's an even flow back and forth of like, hey, we get your expertise in this event, you get X, Y, Z, ABC, whatever it is. I think that's always the way to approach that. And then it'll feel more like a community rather than a, you know, like I said, exploitation, or like you're asking someone to work for free or something like that.
Thank you. And then I also have a follow-up question I put in the chat too, which is when you're communicating with people about events and stuff like that for the actual community, if there's any tools, especially for smaller communities that we're not looking to pay for a subscription, maybe, but like I was looking into TinyLetter and Luma, just different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the answer is like whatever works for you and your use case, right? There, especially in that particular realm, there's a million, you know, platforms for email and like, you know, outreach and those kinds of things. You know, I always sort of advise people like go wherever people are already at, you know, which in most cases is their email inbox. No matter what everybody's, you know, on their high horse about how much they hate email and email's ruining the world. Anyway, we're all checking our inbox right now as this event rolls on, right? Like you don't have a choice. So I do find that email is still a pretty solid, you know, way of getting the word out. But this is also, you know, another thing that when you have guests on that you can ask them to do, hey, can you promote this to your network? And maybe we get a bunch of people that don't know about us and we can cross-pollinate and like more of a partnership of how we promote these kinds of events. You know, is a really good like way to open it up to people that have never maybe heard of you before.
Thank you. Yeah, because I find that like even though there's a lot of people in the Facebook group, I think a lot of people turn off their notifications because they don't want all the random posts. So I'm thinking like an email strategy would be good so we don't miss people.
Well, and yeah, and just one finer point there is it doesn't help, you know, when the platform that everybody's on and uses goes down for a day and like whatever.
Yeah.
Always having more of a direct line of communication to people, you know, in addition to like a, you know, Facebook or whatever, is also helpful, right? Like now you can email them and go, hey, you know, I guess we can't chat today, but at least we can still communicate and have some, you know, owning the customer, owning the user is really important, right? So like you have the email list or whatever, so that should something happen on your platform or whatever, you have a way to like still get to them. So I highly recommend that.
Cool. Well, thanks so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Jesse, if you want to come up and ask your question.
Hey there. Really appreciate your time. So I just started a new role. I'm about a week in as a community manager for Adalo. It's a no-code software company that helps you create apps without having to know how to code. And so
I need that.
This is a new role for me. So I've been in different industries and just really trying to wrap my mind around the process. And my initial instinct is what tactics do I need? How should I spend my time? What should I accomplish today and this week? And, you know, I'm thinking that on that front. And I reached out to a guy on Twitter, David Spinks, and he we had a short meeting and he helped me to see that's not where I should start. I need to take a few steps back and think a bigger picture, you know, kind of Simon Sinek, start with the why. Yep. And so I'm just wondering how do you determine that why? How do you come up with this mission and really objective of your community? What are some of the processes you go through in your mind? And then on the flip side of that, how do you measure success? Because with community, it's so relational. I mean, there are numbers involved, but just what's your thought process on measuring success as well?
Yeah, good advice from David, by the way. So here's what I would say is that kind of going back to what I was saying before, like shared value is always a term that's sort of like rattling around in my brain, you know? And so in your shoes, I would be thinking about how can I provide value to both you know, your customers or your users as well as the business, right? And figure out, like, if you drew a Venn diagram, you know, of all those things, what's the piece that's in the middle? And I kind of think that that's actually where you start and say, hey, maybe we're going to do all these other things too. That's great. But like, let's start with the overlap, right? What's the activity, the one activity or the two activities that we can do now and get started with that are actually going to help us move this thing forward and start to build the community and like rapport and, you know, some of those things. I suspect, knowing what I know about platforms like yours and the types of people, i.e. me, that would need a platform like that, you know, even though it's low code, no code, and you're sort of democratizing, you know, the ability to build apps, they're still going to have a lot of questions and a lot of like, hey, what do I do when? What happens if? Have you ever seen this? You know, kind of questions. And I feel like that's just a great opportunity to think about maybe one of your strongest use cases out of the gate here is just that connection of like people so that they don't feel alone, you know, like, oh, cool, like other people have this same problem I do, or, you know, maybe here's someone that's a little bit more of an expert in building apps that can help me, you know, do what I'm doing. I really think you know, for what you're trying to do, like having a vibrant community is going to make a lot of difference in, you know, I'm not just being thrown into this platform and trying to build an app, but I actually have like a support network around me that's going to be reasonable as a way to build my confidence, I guess, for lack of a better term, that I can do this, you know, that I don't abandon in the first week because I just feel like I don't know what I'm doing. You know, so I kind of think that's where I would start if I were you, is just what are all those different value propositions and where's the one in the middle that we can start with? And then over time you can expand and try new things. But I would try to conquer like one elemental thing first, you know, just to see how it goes and do it on an experiment basis. You know, you don't got to go out and buy a platform right away or whatever. Just start engaging people a little bit, see how it goes. And I think over time you'll learn what, you know, what's working and what's not, and then you can go invest in something more significant.
Yeah, that's really good. We have a vibrant forum, and a lot of our what we call experts, people who are really good with our platform, and we're trying to assimilate them into really so that the community's helping the community, because our staff is only so limited to be able to support with how fast we're growing. And so how then, with that second question, do you measure success there?
Yeah. Are people happy? Are they renewing? Are they staying on board? You know, again, back to the business metrics, right?
Okay,
like
yeah, right. Day, so that crossover, okay.
Yeah. Like at the end of the day, I mean, you know, they can tell us they're pleased with the community and engaging a lot there and all that stuff. But I think the real question is this driving business value, right? And like put it in kind of a more of an older school term, like if, you know, Squarespace, Wix, those companies, right? They sort of had the idea of like, oh, like no code websites. Their number one thing that they always used to talk about is, you know, we have the greatest support in the world. You can call 24/7, 365 and get help. And that's how they convince people that like, oh, I don't know anything, but I can build a website, right? That's sort of the safety blanket. And I think in your case, kind of in the more modern version of that, community can become that thing. It's part of the sales pitch of like, hey, why should I use your platform instead of one of your, you know, the 50 million competitors that are also doing, you know, no code app stuff. And you can honestly look at them and say, because we have this vibrant community full of experts that can really help you like get over the hump and build something quickly and get to value faster, right? That's a hell of a like way to position it, I think, to customers.
Awesome. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the question.
Also, Jesse, this is what community is about. Aaron just posted a link down in the global chat if you want to check that out, of another no code community. So just using other communities as inspiration, I think is a great way to go. And I want to be conscious of everybody's time here. We kind of hit our limit. Brian, I don't know if you can stay a couple minutes longer. I'm sure people would love to talk with you, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. This has been an incredibly informative session. I've learned a lot. I hope you all have learned a lot. Everybody bring in the claps, please, for Brian. This is phenomenal. This is Toucan, by the way, so anybody who has a couple of extra minutes, stick around, go join some other groups, talk about what we just learned. Come talk to any of the kind of Toucan team. So I'm here to talk to anybody about Toucan, about community. And please come to our third event. our third How to Build a Community event. It's going to be in about a month from now. We're really grateful to have you all here, and thank you so much. I hope everybody stays happy and healthy, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.